On the day my wife gave birth to Bok Noyet Kwang's child, to prevent me from causing a riot, my wife's parents called 10 bodyguards to guard outside the delivery room. But until the birth was over, I still didn't show up to cause trouble. My mother-in-law grabbed my wife's hand, sighed and said, "Vunin, don't worry, with us here, we will absolutely not let him get even half a step close to you. Your father also brought someone to watch at the hospital gate. If he dares to come, we will break his legs." My wife nodded weakly, but still reflexively looked towards the elevator door. However, the place was completely empty. At this moment, she breathed a sigh of relief. She couldn't understand. She was just helping Bok Noyet Kwang save the last drop of blood. Why can't I sympathize with her? Looking at the crying child in the nurse's arms, she smiled contentedly in her heart, thinking, if he can come to visit the child tomorrow, I will no longer consider the previous quarrels, and will also agree to let him be the father of my child. But she didn't know that I had just filed an application with the United Nations. In 7 days, I will give up my citizenship, become a doctor without borders, and never return here again. The day Chu Vunin was discharged from the postpartum care center was also the day I had just completed the handover procedures at the hospital. As soon as I walked to the door, I heard happy laughter inside. This child is so adorable. His big eyes are just like his father's. The mother-in-law happily held the baby in her arms. As for Tan Din, he brought out a bowl of hot chicken soup from the kitchen. I cooked this soup myself. Your body is still very weak. You need to supplement a lot. He sat down by the bed and gently fed Chu Vunin spoonfuls of soup. That warm scene is like a real family. The father-in-law held the tambourine in his hand, laughing so much that he couldn't close his mouth. This child really makes people love him. Exactly like his father, but fortunately not like that cold-faced guy from Tu Hang. If he didn't have a doctor father, he would definitely be very troublesome. My hand that was holding the doorknob suddenly tightened. I suddenly remembered the first time I met my father-in-law. He patted my shoulder and said, "Being a doctor is very good. Saving people is the pride of the whole family." He also said that in the past he was also a doctor. If it weren't for the patient's assault and injury to his hand, he would not have had to retire early. But now, he says doctors don't deserve a home. I only studied abroad for 1 year, but this house now has absolutely no room for me anymore. I bowed my head and gave a bitter smile. Chu Vunin and I have been married for 3 years. She said that she follows the doctrine of not having children, and I also understand that having children is like passing through death's door, so I have never forced her to have children. I still remember the day she went to study abroad. She cried until her eyes turned red, saying she couldn't bear to leave me. Obviously, for the past year, we have called every day to share our lives with each other. Even our colleagues around us often tease us that we've been married for 3 years and still feel like a newlywed couple. But a month ago, I had a hard time asking for leave to go home. Even though I had to sit for 8 hours on the plane, I didn't complain about being tired at all. Yet when I rushed home, I saw a pregnant Chu Vunin surpassing me, standing next to her first love, Tan Din. My thoughts were pulled back to reality by Tan Din's words. "When did you come back for me? Why are you still standing outside the door without coming in?" Hearing him say that, everyone in the room looked towards the door. When my father-in-law saw the resignation letter in my hand, his face immediately turned gloomy. "What was I thinking before, giving my daughter to someone like you? It's really unlucky. Now you quit your job and don't want to work anymore, intending to let these 2 old people raise you? Why is there a husband like you in this world?" My mother-in-law also joined in and blamed me. "Even with such a stable job, you still can't do it. Tell me, what else can you do? Vunin's body is weak now. Both she and the child need a lot of money. If you don't go to work, can the whole family of 3 drink the northwest wind and survive?" Hearing these words, I just felt funny. Whoever's wife and children, he or she takes care of themselves. Tu Hang, what are you talking about? Don't you have any responsibility? Chu Vunin finally couldn't bear it anymore. Her eyes were red. She shouted loudly at me. Perhaps because she was too excited, she clutched her chest and coughed violently. 3 years ago, if Tan Din hadn't saved me in the car accident, I probably would have died. Both of his parents have passed away, and now he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Maybe soon no one in this world will remember him anymore. Why do you keep targeting him like that? Am I the kind of dirty woman holding up a piece of paper in your heart? Tan Din heartbrokenly patted her back and then turned his head to look at me. Please stop talking. I know it's all my fault. I promise from now on I won't appear in your lives anymore. But please don't affect your relationship as husband and wife because of me. Is that okay? I looked at the 4 people in front of me, realizing they were standing on the same front line. The more I thought about it, the more ridiculous it felt. It turns out this is a real family. At this time, Chu Vunin suddenly spoke. My patience has its limits. If you continue to target Tan Din for no reason in the future, then don't return to this house anymore. If you still want to continue living with me, then behave properly. Next week, at my baby's first month party, you can declare in front of relatives and friends that you are the baby's father. Next week, I glanced at the baby sleeping soundly in the stroller. Next week I will leave for a trip abroad, but before I go, I don't mind leaving them a gift that they will never forget for the rest of their lives. I nodded without expression, then finished speaking. I didn't care about their reaction. Turn around and go straight to the room to pack your things. When deciding to leave, absolutely. I don't want to leave any trace of myself here anymore. Cheerful laughter from the living room spread through the door. My hands folded the clothes and paused slightly. Mr. Tan Din, I want my son to have your last name. That way, even if he calls someone else dad in the future, he will always remember that you are his real father. Without having to see it with my own eyes, I can imagine how gentle and sincere Chu Vunin said when he said this. As for my heart, it has long been hurt by her to the point of being torn to pieces, with no way to mend it. Last month, when I hurriedly returned home, I still held in my hand a special souvenir bought from abroad for Chu Vunin. But as soon as I got to the door, I saw her and Tan Din holding hands, just returning from a walk. Unlike Chu Vunin's panicked expression, Tan Din just looked at me with suspicious eyes and asked, "Did you go to the wrong house?" I didn't say anything, just silently stared at Chu Vunin's protruding belly. Looks like my wife is pregnant again. No matter how much I deceive myself, I cannot believe that this child is mine. Until Chu Vunin panicked and stood in front of Tan Din, introducing to him, "This is my husband, from death." I thought that when he heard that sentence, Tan Din would be timid and restrain himself. But no, he was like a real homeowner. Come inside and sit for a while. As we passed each other, he lowered his voice, just loud enough for the 2 of us to hear. "I heard you're a lot older than me, so I'll call you Big Brother. After all, your wife is pregnant with my child." Anger flared up in my chest. I couldn't hold it any longer. A powerful punch, straight to his face. I completely lost control. Everyone was distant. Chu Vunin's longing turned into anger. If I had a knife in my hand at that time, I probably would have really killed this scum couple. Until the neighbors heard the noise and called the police, we were all taken to the station. But because this was a family matter, the police could not intervene and could only tell us to go home first. As soon as I got home, my parents-in-law rushed over without asking a word, just cursing me severely. "You just came back and caused such a big scene, making the neighbors laugh at you. All those years of studying were all in vain. You hit someone. If something happens, don't expect us to ignore it." It turns out that they always knew about the relationship between Chu Vunin and Tan Din, and even wholeheartedly supported both of them. Yet all this time, I was the only one who was confused, and unaware. My throat was bitter, and my heart was in extreme pain. Chu Vunin trembled and walked to my side, tried to pull my hand back, and gently advised, "I never thought of betraying you. It's just that Tan Din's health is not good. The doctor said he only has half a year to live at most. I can't bear to let him go without a child. I also thought about discussing it with you before, but you were abroad. I was afraid that you would worry and it would affect your studies, so I decided to wait for you to come home," said. "If you agree, let's raise this baby together, okay?" The story of giving birth to children came out of her mouth so gently. I packed the last set of clothes into my suitcase. At this moment, my mother-in-law pushed open the door and walked in. Seeing the suitcase at my feet, a satisfied look appeared on her face. "It's good to be reasonable. Before you weren't at home, I let Tan Din sleep in your room. The office was also converted into a room for the baby. Tonight, you can sleep in the living room, or go to the hotel to stay." I was really too tired and didn't have the energy to look for a hotel anymore. I just nodded silently and decided to spend the night on the sofa. But at midnight, the sound of a baby crying came from the bedroom. I tried to put on the headset, but I heard an angry voice say, "Quickly comfort the child, Otherwise, he will keep crying. Aren't you my baby? Taking care of you is enough. Babies cry a little more to make their lungs stronger. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to ignore those annoying sounds. But as soon as I close my eyes, the image of Chu Vunin confessing to me for the first time appears in my mind. Back then, she was so simple and bright. In her eyes, there was only me, but that person no longer belongs to me. I kept dreaming like that, sleeping through the night. Early the next morning, I picked up my suitcase and left home. Sometime later, I went to the management agency to cancel my household registration and at the same time complete the procedures to go abroad. Because we have documents approved by the government, all procedures are processed very quickly and the staff does not ask many questions. It wasn't until I was about to leave that a staff member suddenly called me back. She gave me a piece of fruit candy. I hope you get what you want. I smiled at her with relief, then left the office. I was about to find something to eat, but unexpectedly, I ran into Chu Vunin and Tan Din, along with my wife's parents. Tan Din wore an expensive tailored suit, looking full of vitality and high spirits. Looking at him like this, he doesn't look like he's about to die. I saw him from afar and thought it was him. Vunin, he said, you can't be here. His eyes fell on the recruitment flyer in my hand, smiling as if he understood everything. So you're looking for a job? But with your skinny figure, a chief machinist working with manual labor, isn't he making himself miserable? I don't answer. This leaflet was given to me by a little girl on the street in the cold weather. Seeing that she was still trying, I just conveniently took one. Seeing me silent, just clutching the piece of paper in my hand, Tan Din smiled mockingly. Why didn't you say earlier that you were looking for a job? Maybe I can help with something. After all, as a family, if you live well, Vunin's second half of his life will also have support, and I will feel more secure. My silence felt like an admission. Chu Vunin initially looked skeptical, but her expression immediately changed. She frowned tightly, her eyes looking at me full of anger. What else can you recommend? He gave up his good job as a doctor on his own. Now, even if he starves to death on the street, no one will pity him. From dying, you really have no responsibility at all. Do you think like this you can force me to give up the baby? I looked at that once familiar face, but at this moment I felt extremely strange. I remember when I first got married, because I was caught up in the infighting in the hospital, my position was affected. I thought about quitting my job and changing careers. At that time, Chu Vunin just hugged me gently, patted my back, and whispered in my ear, husband and wife are one body. Whatever you decide, I will support you. So what if you quit your job? I believe that a bright pearl like you will never be buried. Husband, I will always be by your side. But the person who said he would always be by my side, now let another man humiliate me. She forgot the words she said to me, and also forgot the deep love I once had for her. Even my wife's parents stood beside me, shaking their heads in disappointment, as if I were the most useless person in the world. Before, it was true that I was blind before I decided to entrust my daughter's entire life to you. Luckily, we are still alive, but if we had died, I don't know how you would have tortured her. The more the two of them spoke, the more outrageous they became, attracting the attention of passers-by. Everyone stopped and looked towards us. My hands clenched into fists, preparing to speak. Tan Din suddenly stepped forward. We're getting ready to take family photos. How about you come along too? Anyway, I'll still have to ask you to take care of Vunin and the baby in the future. Chu Vunin immediately interrupted him, smiling coldly and contemptuously. Look at his poor appearance. Even if he entered the frame, he would only embarrass the whole family. Having finished speaking, she turned around and went straight into the studio, not forgetting to urge Tan Din to quickly follow. We'll leave now. Won't bother you looking for a job anymore. Tan Din patted my shoulder meaningfully, then left. Watching their backs disappear, there was no longer a ripple in my heart. In the eyes of outsiders, it is truly a happy, harmonious family. How much? If that's what Chu Vunin wants, then it doesn't matter if I let go and give my blessings. 3 days before leaving, I received a text message from the director. He said that the expert I asked, contacted before, just returned home today to attend the forum. I can help check my father-in-law for coronary heart disease. My father-in-law's heart is not healthy. A few years ago, he had to go to the emergency room. So, when I studied abroad, I asked my colleagues to collect more documents with similar cases for reference. Anyway, The friendship of many years still exists. After helping him check his health, we no longer have any problems with them. But as soon as I mentioned taking him to the doctor, my father-in-law's face immediately darkened. What's the point of going to the hospital when you're suddenly healthy? This brat, do you want to wipe my ass? My previous coronary artery bypass surgery was clearly successful. What else should I check? A leading cardiovascular expert happened to be in the country today. Dad can take the time to check up a bit, considering it's good to prevent illness first. But before I could finish my sentence, my father-in-law angrily threw the glass of water straight at me. You're very good at saying beautiful things. The top expert you talk about is not something anyone can meet if they want to meet it. An unemployed person like you can't meet anyone. He's always talking nonsense. Look at Ton Din. He stayed up all night just to get the number to see a specialist for me. Where were you at that time? He constantly compared me to Ton Din. Attitude says it all. No matter what I do, it's all wrong. No matter how hard I try, I can't be as good as Ton Din. Realizing this, I could only laugh bitterly. If Dad doesn't want to go, then that's fine. Just consider worrying about money and humiliating yourself. Very quickly, the day of the baby's triumphant party arrived. I arrived late on purpose. As soon as I entered the banquet hall, it was already crowded with relatives and relatives. It felt even more solemn than my wedding with Chu Vunin the day before. Right in front of the party door, a family photo of 5 people was solemnly displayed, which to me was just a farce from start to finish. As soon as they saw me appear, relatives immediately whispered, "You don't need to listen to guess what they are saying." Not long after, an aunt ran up and grabbed my hand, warmly asking, "Tu Hang, when are you returning home? So why haven't you heard anything about Vunin? I heard that after studying abroad you are about to be promoted to official head of department at Trung Hung Hospital. Your future is very bright." I didn't answer, just nodded slightly as a courtesy, but I could see their eyes were filled with pity, so clear that it couldn't be hidden. Anyway, in that family photo I was not there, and the person who was always next to Chu Vunin at the party was also not me. A talkative person pointed in the distance, where a man was thoughtfully preparing dessert for Chu Vunin, then asked, "Tu Hang, who is that man? I've never heard that your family has a younger brother." I smiled faintly. Chu Vunin's new husband. The people around were all waiting to talk. The girls immediately widened their eyes and then gathered together to whisper. Anyway, Chu Vunin and her family don't care, so why do I need to help them hide it? At this moment, Chu Vunin stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "Thank you everyone for coming to my son's victory party. Before, I never thought I would be a mother. I always felt like I couldn't take on this role well. But right at the moment in the delivery room, hearing my child's first cry, I realized how sacred motherly love is." She spoke emotionally, as if she was just a second away from making herself cry. The aunt standing next to me suddenly shouted loudly, "Let the child's father come up and say a few words." Where's the child's father? The atmosphere in the banquet hall immediately became tense. Everyone's eyes moved back and forth between me and Ton Din. The answer was obvious, but this aunt wanted to force Chu Vunin to admit it herself. I looked straight into Chu Vunin's eyes, then slowly walked onto the stage. Under her panicked gaze, I calmly pulled out the microphone from her hand. "What are you going to do? I warn you not to talk nonsense. Otherwise, I won't leave it alone." Her eyes flashed with panic. She pulled my sleeve tightly and warned in a low voice. But I still calmly withdrew my hand, not even looking at her once. "If you don't do bad things, why are you afraid of ghosts?" I said, my voice quiet. "First of all, thank you everyone for not being afraid to travel far to attend today's victory party. Everyone here is the one who witnessed me and Chu Vunin walking down the aisle after getting married. I always remember everyone's blessings, but surely when you entered the banquet hall, everyone also saw the family photo hanging at the door." Hearing this, Chu Vunin's face immediately changed. She angrily rushed forward, trying to snatch the microphone from my hand. I quickly dodged, grabbed the microphone tightly, and continued to speak. Honestly, even I was surprised when I saw that photo. But what surprised me the most was that after returning from studying abroad for a year, I discovered that my wife, who had insisted on not wanting children, was 8 months pregnant. I took a deep breath, speaking neither fast nor slow. "I can't swallow this. I don't want to bear this injustice. Chu Vunin, let's divorce." I pulled out the divorce agreement that I had prepared a long time ago from my pocket and threw it hard at her feet. This is what I've wanted to do since the day I saw her and Tan Din embracing each other. Chu Vunin's face turned pale. She panicked and reached out to take back the microphone, wanting to control this chaotic atmosphere, but she also wanted to hold my arm, wanting to explain something. Tu Hang, can't you understand me? Why haven't I told you before? As long as you don't mention this again, we will live well as a family of 3 in the future. A family of 3, you said, could have anyone as long as it doesn't include me. And I don't want to continue lying to myself anymore. Sign, there's nothing more to say between us. I wish you happiness. Chu Vunin shook his head vigorously. I won't sign. I don't agree to divorce you. Tu Hang, don't dream. In fact, when I previously contacted a lawyer to draw up a divorce agreement, the lawyer said that I could ask Chu Vunin to leave without taking any assets with me. After all, in this marriage, she clearly gave birth to another man's child, which is the clearest evidence of adultery. But from investigating and collecting evidence until the court pronounces a verdict, everything takes too much time. I'm about to leave this country. No matter how much money I have in my hand, there's nowhere to spend it. So, I just took the assets that originally belonged to me and entrusted them to a lawyer. After I leave, I will donate all the money to the elementary school in the mountains. Between me and Chu Vunin, there is nothing more to say to each other. Looking at the chaotic scene before me, I turned around and left. But Chu Vunin was not willing, picked up the baby, gave it to his parents, and quickly ran after me. But after just a few steps, Tan Din, who was healthy, suddenly clutched his chest and panted. Vunin, I'm so upset. Perhaps because he was so excited just now, he felt like he was about to be unable to bear it anymore. She could only watch me walk away step by step, thinking that when everything was over, she would find me to talk things out clearly. Anyway, as long as she refuses to sign the divorce papers, the relationship between the two of us will remain intact. Thinking that in his heart, Chu Vu suddenly felt a little more relieved. The whole group rushed to take Tan Din to the hospital, but on the way, Chu Vu's father seemed to be too excited and his heart rate increased rapidly. She was so worried that she burst into tears. After a while, she didn't know who to take care of first. At that moment, Chu Vu's father was about to be pushed into the operating room. They happened to meet the director and a leading cardiovascular expert. At this moment, Chu Vu didn't have time to think. He quickly rushed to kneel in front of the dean and begged, "Sir, please save my father. His condition is very dangerous." Previously, there was a person named Tan Din who came to line up to register for an examination with you. Do you remember? The powerful expert stared at Chu Vunin for a moment, then hesitantly asked, "You are Tu Hang's wife, right?" Previously, he asked the director to contact me, hoping I could help examine his father-in-law. At that time, I also saw her photo on his phone. Khan, he is filial, but I remember that 2 days ago he told me that there was no need to be examined anymore. Now here it is again. Hearing that, Chu Vu was suddenly stunned, raised his head with both confusion and surprise in his eyes. They never believed that I had the ability to contact a reputable expert. They always thought that everything was handled by Tan Din, but now they know that they have always misunderstood me. At this moment, Chu Vu naturally didn't know what to say. The director pulled her aside, just smiled apologetically, and said, "Sorry, Chu. We have to fly to the US later to attend a conference. I'm afraid we won't be able to participate in this surgery. But please rest assured, our medical team is the best in the city. We will definitely try our best to save your father." Having finished speaking, the two of them left one after another. As for this matter, I only heard the director tell me. After that, Chu Vu suddenly knelt in front of the hospital's operating room. Next to her was her mother, with a face full of regret. "Now it's good. What did Mom say before? No matter how shameless Tu Hang is, this matter cannot be taken as a joke. But you people don't believe it. Do you see the consequences now? If something is really wrong with your father, then you are the biggest sinner." The anger made the baby in her arms scared and crying. She angrily placed the child on the plastic chair next to her. "What are you crying for? Cry all day long." Those who don't know would think that this family gave birth to an ancestor. But at this moment, Chu Vu was no longer in the mood to pay attention anymore. She slowly took out her phone, intending to call me. Perhaps now I'm the only one who can contact a top specialist for surgery. But my phone couldn't be reached, because at that time I was on a flight abroad. My head leaned against the window, watching the scenery outside gradually recede. until the powerful thrust lifted the plane up through the deep blue sky. I realized I was lost in a surreal world where everything seemed separate from reality. From this moment on, I no longer have any nationality. I will dedicate myself to the whole world. After more than 10 hours of flying, my teammates and I landed tired. The scenery here is completely different from the peace of home. War and weapons are everywhere. Even a little carelessness can lead to loss of life. On the bus, our medical captain introduced the local situation. At the same time, he gave each of them a gun. He said, "Saving people is important, but more important than the mission is your own life." That sentence shocked me. Suddenly, I remembered the years I was married to Chuvu Nin. At that time, I considered her everything. At that time, didn't I also consider her more important than my own life? Soon we arrived. On the muddy road, many wounded soldiers sat in enlightenment. Fresh blood stained their arms or legs red. Now I know, this area just went through a bombing. Those with more serious injuries had the entire operating room filled up, so they could only be left to temporarily sit on the street. I threw away all other thoughts and rushed to help them. But that's just the beginning. In the months and days that followed, each experience changed my view of the world. At the same time, I am also increasingly steadfast in the path I have chosen. I have never regretted coming here, nor have I ever regretted becoming a doctor without borders. Until one afternoon, a colleague rushed over, saying someone was looking for me. I thought it was a patient just about to walk out. The colleague continued, "Looks like someone from the country, a girl." My steps slowed down a bit. The image of Chuvu Nin immediately appeared in his mind. Before she could open her mouth to refuse, she came to the place. "Tu Hang, is it really you?" Her eyes were red, and she rushed over to hug me. I felt hot tears falling down my neck. Feeling a bit unnatural, he quickly pushed her away. I remember as soon as I got on the plane, the lawyer sent me a text message. He said the divorce lawsuit has been officially filed. Regardless of whether Chuvu Nin agrees or not, according to the law, half a month later our marriage will officially end. Divorce. So why is she working so hard to come all the way here now? Chuvu, of course, we are divorced. Since you're gone, a lot has happened recently. My dad, he passed away. Her voice was choked. Her trembling hands clasped the hem of her shirt, as if trying to suppress her surging emotions. I was stunned. I didn't expect Chuvu's father to suddenly pass away. Sorry, at that time my family didn't believe you, thinking you were lying. But the person who really lied was Ton Din. He basically never went to any experts. My father's illness continued, with no one treating him. If we had listened to you at that time and gone to find that top expert to examine him, maybe he would still be alive now. Speaking of this, Chuvu suddenly covered his face, sat down on the ground, sobbing. I stood still, feeling a bit indescribable. One win. Here every day I witnessed the scene of separation and farewell. I thought I had soon become numb to death. But now, hearing these words from Chuvu Nin, my heart still cannot help but feel bitter. Anyway, from the beginning, my father-in-law treated me well. Sorry, Tu Hang. I always look for you. I want to personally apologize to you. Only later did I know that he did not simply quit his job, but wanted to become a doctor without borders. That's why I didn't hesitate to go far and come here. Please follow me home. Is that okay? This place is too dangerous. I've already lost my father. I can't lose you too. I shook my head. No, I won't go back. As Doctors Without Borders, I now no longer belong to any country. Where can I go? Only when the war ends and no one needs us anymore can I return home. Before that day comes, anywhere in this world can be my home. I really know I was wrong. You shouldn't have lied to me. You shouldn't have thought yourself right and gave birth to that baby. Now I have to pay the price. Now Ton Din's health is very weak. The doctor said it might only be a few more days. Tu Hang, how am I supposed to live with my child alone? You said you would protect me all your life. Yours? What is your story? I still have work to do. This place is very dangerous. You should return to your country soon. Having finished speaking, I turned around and walked towards the barracks. If you don't come back, then I won't come back either. I'll stay here with you. Wait until you finish everything you want to do, then I'll go home with you. I didn't want to pay attention to her words, just quietly turned away, but before I could take a few steps, I heard Chuvu Nin receive a call that seemed to be from a domestic hospital. What? Ton Din is about to die? I will return home immediately. You must wait for me to return. At that moment, two bombers suddenly flew across the sky, the familiar sound of engines rang out. Instinctively, I immediately rushed forward and pushed Chu Vu Nin to the ground. She shouted, "Tutu Hang, are you crazy?" But soon, her voice was drowned out by a violent explosion in the distance. Once again, the ground shook violently, sand and dust from the explosion scattered, covering us. I didn't pay attention to her anger, slowly raised my head to look around, and then quickly stood up. Chu Vu Nin was clearly stunned and sat down on the ground, unable to react. I turned around and looked at her, then pulled her up and away from inside. I was used to life-threatening attacks like this, but for her, this was the first time experiencing the horror of war. Her lips trembled. Are you going to die here? Or not? I was silent. After a while, he replied, "I'll ask the captain to arrange someone to take you home in a moment. Don't come back here in the future." Chu Vu Nin's face was covered with dust. She held the phone tightly in her hand and said nothing. Very soon, the captain found a local person. That person drove an old pickup truck and waved for Chu Vu Nin to quickly get in the car. Before leaving, I quietly stuffed 2 more bills into the driver's hand, telling him to take her safely to the airport. Even though there is no longer any love between Chu Vu Nin and I cannot stand by and watch her die here. Chu Vu Nin said nothing, seemingly still immersed in the fear from before. When I turned around, I could only see her figure hastily jumping into the car. The corner of my lips curled up slightly, as if I had already anticipated her reaction. Very quickly after that, I put this matter behind me. 2 years later, I had the opportunity to return to my country. Now, I have a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of medicine. This time I returned with my girlfriend. We met on the battlefield, and she had her face destroyed to protect me. I promised to take care of her all my life. After a long time together, I gradually realized my true feelings. I think perhaps God saw that I was so lonely and pitiful, so he brought fate before me. This time, I will definitely cherish my love. Immediately upon returning home, the director of the Central Hospital personally came to the airport to welcome me. He looked at me with joy and exclaimed, "You're a lot darker and thinner. The past 2 years outside have been very hard, right?" Those simple words of concern made my heart shake strongly. I tried to control the stinging feeling on the bridge of my nose and stretched out my arms to hug the director. But just after taking a few steps, I saw a familiar figure in the distance. Chu Vu Nin was standing there holding the hand of a boy. I don't know where she got the information from, but she still ran to the airport to pick me up. It's just that, in just 2 short years, she's changed quite a bit. No longer radiant and beautiful like before, but instead has a more mature look. She didn't come forward, and I just quietly looked at her with an expressionless face. My girlfriend realized something and immediately took the initiative to hold my hand, clasping our fingers together. "Is something wrong? Is that your ex-wife? Do you want to come over and say hello?" It looks like she still has a lot to say to you. I retracted my gaze and shook my head slightly. There's nothing to say. From the moment I left that month-long party, there was no longer anything between me and her. We became strangers. There was nothing left to say. I looked away and turned to get in the car. The car rolled away, and not far away, I received a text message from Chu Vu Nin. For the past 2 years, she has been sending me messages, but because I don't use a domestic phone number, I have never received them. And just a minute ago, she sent a text message with only 3 words, "I'm sorry." I touched the screen. My finger hesitated for a long time, then decisively blocked the number and deleted the message. I took out the SIM card, broke it, and threw it out the window, like I was throwing away all the unnecessary memories, mistakes, and hurts of the past. Everything gradually disappeared like dust blowing in the wind, leaving only a feeling of relief and peace.